doggy. You give my doggy gastro. You will be cleaning it up with your tongue. Yes, don't you dare feed my doggy that. Hello? Hello? So, I'm back. I'm back. Now, last time I saw you, I'm back downstairs now. I'm back downstairs. Or home, which is all nice. So if somebody wants to feed leftovers to my doggy. So if I feed my doggy. So if I feed my doggy the crud that I feed the demons. I'll make the poor doggy so sick. Anyway, you leave the place for a little bit of spring and boom, it all goes to hell. Anyway, I'm back now. So, we can all get everything organized and I am back with a new play. Yes, new play. We all like a new play. So, what is my new play, you ask me? Well, is it good? I had to work my way up to this one. Because let's be frank, even for down here, is a bit dark. Even for down here. I really like it. And it's quite appropriate given pestilence is still abroad. Oops. Sorry about that. We still haven't got him back in the stables, but we're working on it. Since pestilence is still abroad, we go with Shakespeare's plague play, King Lear. Now, I like monarchs, but King Lear is why it's important not to let monarchs think that they're gods. They're not gods. We are gods. They're not gods. Stupid little mortals. So, we have, do you like my new suit? You like it? I got it when I went up topside. Oh, very punk, isn't it? So, King Lear starts, not with King Lear, has a little tiny bit of play right at the beginning that everybody chops, or a lot of people chop. But there's a little bit of play that's really important because it gives a whole lot of motivation to a whole lot of other people. Because this is a story about fathers and daughters and fathers and sons. It's a very, very different story. So that's what this is. And it starts with Gloucester, who will become very important later on, introducing his bastard son Edmund to Kent. And we go and say his bastard son Edmund because he makes a really big deal about in front of Kent and in front of Edmund that his son is a bastard. So is over and over and over again, as though the poor boy who's standing right next to him has absolutely no feelings about this old fart constantly going on about how he's such a bastard in a time when that actually matters. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Do you know how many of the heroes were bastards? All of them. Nobody thought any less of them. Father, Uncle Zeus gets lots of them. They all come down here. They don't like that. What, I'm going to piss off my Auntie Hera and let them go upstairs? Ooh, no. So, we don't really care. They're around, they happen, so what? Okay, Hera cares, but I don't care. What do I care? So, he goes and insults him. then, so they've been having a conversation, and Kent tries to like smooth it over and like avoid completely and utterly humiliating Edmund, but it's not really good because they're then interrupted by the whole court coming in. Lear is coming in. Lear has come to a decision. They are all of them ready for Cordelia, his youngest daughter's wedding. She's going to be married, so it's all big celebration. Wonderful. King Lear really could have just been a comedy, but no. The comedies don't usually start with weddings, they end with them. But then again, last week's comedy had a wedding in the middle, so, you know, but it was a weird kind of wedding. But anyway, they're all ready for their sister Cordelia's, the youngest daughter of Lear, to be married to either Burgundy, or the Duke of Burgundy, or the King of France, depending. Haven't decided exactly yet. So all of these people, nobody has a love match. There are no love matches in King Lear. Anyway, King Lear has struck upon the brilliant idea. FYI, not a god, not a brilliant idea, very, very dumb. Just thought you'd know that. He's got this brilliant idea that he is going to retire. He's going to retire because he's like 80 and he's really old and he's feeling it. And he's going to retire. And he is going to divide his kingdom between his 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Now, these 3 daughters, he then says to them, he doesn't tell them what he's going to do. So they don't know what's at stake until the first one speaks. But these 3 daughters, they're all fine. They're all quite happy with each other. There's no, yeah. Not like when I get together with my sisters. Yeah. But there's no antagonism. They're all good. And Goneril and Regan are older. And Cordelia seems to be the like golden child. And so they seem to know what the game is with their father. They really do. And I rather suspect that Goneril and Regan have spent much of their time protecting their little sister from their father's bullying and capricious nature, because I don't think she's had a mother. There's no mother. There is no mother in the whole play. There are no mothers. They probably would have done better if there were a few mothers in there. My smother might be a smother. But she wouldn't let Father Uncle Zeus get away with something like that. No. She totally would not. So, no mothers, big problem. So, Lear asks, how much, Goneril, do you love me? And Goneril, knowing, Dad's a bit nuts, Dad likes people to say exactly what he hears, so obviously he's got something that he wants to hear. So she says, I love you more than anything, blah, 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 and it's all sort of like patently transparent, but this makes the old man happy. And because he thinks he's a god, and therefore he thinks he's due all of this, because he's a small, narcissistic bully. Yes, well, that can be the only explanation, really. Either that or he's completely senile. But he hears all this and thinks, oh, that's good. And so he gives Goneril, you can have this third of my kingdom as a really nice part of the kingdom. It's good. It's got good hunting grounds. It's a good big thing. Then he says to Regan, how much do you love me? And Regan knows this game, and she says, as much as my sister, and then more, so much that I have no love for anything else in the world. And this is where us gods get really annoyed, because that's not due to any human, that's due to us. But she says, more than anything in the world. And so he says, oh, this is really good. He's really getting a whole power trip off this. And he says, right, this third of the kingdom, this is yours. And so he says to Cordelia, his favorite, his little girl, what can you say to get he's already decided he's going to give her the best bit because she's his favorite. Now, you just have to say, how much do you love me? And of course, her sisters are like, come on, Cordelia, play the game, play the game. There's a game in this. And they obviously haven't been there to brief her beforehand that their father is a bit, and so she doesn't play the game. She refuses to play the game. And he's all so drunk on his own importance. She says, I love you as much as you are due as my father. He's so angry. He's like all drunk on his own importance, and he thought he would get a much better saying from his favorite daughter. And he's like, right, not for you, nothing. You are nothing. And this shocks the sisters. They're like, oh, this is not good. This is terrible, really, really terrible. And even old Kent, one of his great advisors, says, what are you doing? Your Majesty, you cannot do this. This is beyond any reasonable thing to do. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Have you lost your freaking mind? Yes, he has. He's lost his freaking mind. And so he banishes Kent. Right, out, gone. I don't want to see you. You've got 5 days to pack, and then on the 6th, you are out of here. If I see you again, you are dead. Not good. Not good. King then brings in Burgundy and France, the Duke of Burgundy and the King of France, and says, right, which of you will have my daughter? She has nothing. And they're like, what on earth could you do to annoy your father that badly? What horrible thing did you do? What kind of a monster are you? No, I just didn't play his game. Huh. Burgundy is very much like, well, I'll take her for what you offered, for the dowry you promised. And King says, no, she gets nothing. She gets nothing. And I'm sorry, I can't marry her. And the King of France, he says, well, I will take you. I will take you and make you a queen, even though you have nothing. And so she marries the King of France. And Lear tells his 2 daughters and their 2 husbands, Albany, who is Goneril's husband, and Cornwall, who is Regan's husband. Cornwall is a really nasty bloke. That they are to rule in his place, to take over the day-to-day running of the kingdom and split Cordelia's half of the land between them, and that he will retire with 100 knights, and he will spend alternate months with each of his daughters. Oh yeah, that's gonna work. That's gonna so work. Yeah. And so they leave, the whole court leaves. Kent is banished. Lear is clearly a bit off his nut. And the daughters are left, Cordelia, to say goodbye to her sisters before she travels to France. And she tells them to look after their father. And the 2 elder sisters are like, this, after Cordelia, like, this is not good. What on earth is going on with Dad? He's gone senile. He's gone completely and utterly senile. We're going to have to watch him because, oh my goodness, this is just not good. Nothing good can come of this. This is not. No, just no. Gloucester now comes and sees his son Edmund. Edmund has decided that being illegitimate is not going to hinder his plans for wealth and power. And he's going to do this by discrediting Edgar, his elder brother. His elder brother is about a year or so older, so they're very close in age. They're both young men, both ambitious young men. Well, Edmund is ambitious. Edgar just is the heir, so he has no need to be ambition. It's going to come to him in the end. Their father's old. Everyone in this court is old. There appears to be very few middle-aged people, whether they've all been killed out in wars, but there seems to be a discrepancy between the old, who are all in their, who are all a bit geriatric. They're all in their, 60s, 70s, 80. And then the younger generation, who all appear to be in their 20s or their 30s. So this seems to be rather an interesting split. There's not those cooler heads that you may get in that middle ground of age. Kent was possibly one of them. He later in the play tells us that he's 48. But not a lot of those people. Seems to be a world run by the elderly and babies. So, Gloucester is convinced by Edmund that he has found a letter from Edgar that tells him that if you come in with me, I will share my inheritance with you, and we will kill our father, and we will share the inheritance. And this sets Gloucester against his son Edgar, who is completely innocent. This is a forged letter. And Edmund then, after Gloucester goes off to prepare to, capture his son and hold him for this, Edmund then, because of course if the two men speak to each other, this will all fall in a heap, so he can't let that happen. So he then speaks to his brother and says, your father, because of this dreadful time where all of this stuff has been happening, all this unnatural behavior is happening, has turned against you and has decided that you are some terrible, terrible fiend out to get him. So hide until I can help you escape. So he does. And of course, Edgar is like, this is going down so nicely. So, when we next see these people, it's only 2 weeks later. This whole arrangement that Kent thought was like rubbish, and frankly even we could see was rubbish from up here, as it played out in like 5 minutes. It's devolved in 2 little weeks. I know 2 little weeks are much longer for mortals, but seriously, 2 little weeks. Lear, with his 100 knights, has caused absolute havoc in Goneril's house. He has been making a riot. He has been making it a brothel, abusing his servants, her servants, everything. Horrible, horrible, horrible. She can't stand it. She's not talking to him anymore. I mean, 2 little weeks. 2 little weeks. And he's already managed to make himself completely the most unwelcome house guest. Let's just say, he is making the suitors that sought Penelope's hand in the Odyssey, that Ulysses slaughtered, he's making them look polite. Not good. Not good. He's making them look polite. And so Goneril has said, I'm not talking to him, and he has abused her servants when they've given them this, and he's got a new servant. a man named Caius, who isn't really Caius, but is actually the banished Kent, who's really worried about his king and has decided to keep an eye on him by pretending to be a servant and unrecognizable. So he's disguised himself. He's unrecognizable, and he is being this loyal and particularly nasty sort of servant to Lear. So he's quite happy to hit Goneril's servants for Lear. So he's doing this. Meanwhile, Lear calls for his jester. He calls for his fool, and his fool comes, and his fool tells rude and dirty jokes, and really basically tells him exactly what Kent had said, that Lear is a fool. He is such a fool because he has taken his crown and split it and handed it over and left himself with nothing. He's left himself with absolutely nothing because what? How can you be king and not, how can you expect to be king when you are unwilling to exercise the power of king, but you are not willing to give up that power? It all is very messy. You can't be king and not be king. You need to retire or abdicate. It doesn't really work. And after 2 weeks, he's discovering this doesn't really work. So Goneril comes in and upbraids her father for doing all of this stuff in her house and making her life an absolute misery. You have 100 knights, 100 of the worst possible knights. They are all of them hideous. What you need for a man of your age, a man of your position, a man of your dignity. Why are you hanging about with all of these drunken knights? Drunken knights who make Jack Falstaff look reputable. That's how bad they are. When Jack Falstaff looks like better company, you know you're in trouble. And she says, you do not need them. I have a palace full of servants who will do your every wish. What do you need 100 knights to follow after you for? What about 50? Get rid of half of them. Get rid of the worst and keep 50 good men to attend you, which is not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable. He's abdicated being king, and he hasn't really abdicated being king in his mind. He is still king, but in name only, and in name only isn't really worth, well, anything. And so he flies into a rage at this. How dare you? And then he curses her. And so he lays into her with a whole load of abuse, like really vicious personal abuse. May you be barren, nasty, nasty stuff. And so he then decides, right, I have one daughter who loves me. I will go and see Regan, and she will take me in. And so he sends off a message to Regan, and he sends off, and Goneril too sends off a message to Regan and says, look, father's coming, go and, don't let him in, send him back, because we've got to have a united front on this thing, or he's just going to walk all over us and our lives are going to be a misery until he dies. Which could be sooner than you think. Well, probably not. So Lear leaves and goes to Goneril. He sends Caius, Kent, ahead of him. They haven't actually gone to Goneril's castle. What's happened is Goneril has heard what's happening. She's twigged that the servant has already come part of the way, got to Goneril's castle, and has warned her that her father's coming, and she has decided to go to Gloucester because we're not at home. You can't come. We're not at home. We're visiting somebody else. We're visiting a family friend. Edmund has also decided that this ruckus is going to be the perfect time to get rid of Edgar, and he pretends to fight with Edgar, having told Edgar that he's in real mortal danger and that he needs to flee. So pretend to fight and then run. Bye-bye. And then father, this has happened and it's terrible. And so Gloucester has him hunted down, and poor Edgar is left with, I can't find anywhere to go. There's no hope. No hope of going anywhere. I will disguise me as a madman and pretend to be poor Tom of Bedlam and hide that way. So that's what he does. Back at Gloucester's castle, the servants are fighting, which is like, seriously, the whole world's gone bad, hasn't it? What is this, Romeo and Juliet, that the servants are going to fight? And Cornwall, Albany is Goneril's husband. Albany is like, sort of like been a bit, what on earth happened here, when he walks in on his father-in-law screaming at his wife. You know, he doesn't really know. He's a bit oblivious, actually. But Cornwall has Lear's servant put into stocks for fighting. And they go into the castle, and Gloucester is like, this is really bad. I feel very bad for you about being stuck in the stocks. I'll see what I can do about it, but sorry. So this is, the situation that Lear discovers when he turns up at Gloucester's castle. He turns up only to discover his servant in the stocks, which makes him very, very, very angry. Because I am the king, this is my messenger, why is he in the stocks? And he suggests so he calls out the king, the castle. And they're all very much like, his daughter comes out and it's like, you have to go back to Goneril. You've still got 2 weeks with Goneril. You've got to go back there. I don't care what argument you've had. You cannot just turn up here and expect to be let in just because you had an argument with Goneril. And so this isn't going down terribly well. The fool is chattering away in his ear. And meanwhile, Goneril then turns up, and the pair of sisters sort of gang up on him. I mean, it's not as if he doesn't deserve it. He's obviously been bullying them all their lives. All their lives he's been doing this, and now he expects to be able to do it without any power, without any position, having given it away. And they are just like, right, we've had enough of this. We've had absolutely enough of this. We've been putting up with this since Mother died. Okay, they don't say that, but you know that they have been putting up with this since Mother died. And they are just, right, you don't need this. You can stay here, says Regan, but with 25 servants, knights. And he says, oh, fine, I'll go with Goneril. She'll let me have 50. No, I'm not letting you have 50. You can have 10. And Regan and Goneril, what? You have whole palaces to your beck and call. What do you need 1 servant for? What do you need 1? You have everything at your disposal. What do you need 1? It's not about need, he says. It's not about need. I don't need. Don't make it about need. It's about being myself. Well, You don't need, you can be yourself out in the rain. He gets so angry and he rants and he raves and the two sisters are implacable. Right, that's it. We'll have none of you. You see to yourself. And so he goes out into the vicious storm and yells and screams out in the storm. Caius, or Kent, meanwhile sends a servant, a messenger, one of the king's men, to France with his ring to prove what it is, that really things have gone disastrously bad and we need help from Cordelia's family. Cordelia needs to send help to her father. Gloucester does not like the idea of the poor old king going out into the middle of nowhere. I mean, he's 80 and it's cold and wet and nasty outside. So he tries to go out, but Cornwall and Regan demand you shut your gates on him. Shut your gates on him. And so Lear and the fool and Caius are out in the storm. Caius is not out with Lear yet, just Lear and the fool. Caius finds them. Lear is just raging. Lear is just raging against the elements. Soaked and freezing. Not good for the old man. This is going to kill him. Which is no doubt the daughter's hope that when they locked him out in the storm. You know, well, if you're going to give away your inheritance, what do you expect? If you thought that was going to stop you getting killed early, please, once you eat the orange, you throw the peel away. He's discovered what happens to orange peel. Kent finds him and brings him to, I found a little hovel that you can wait out the storm in. And they go. And the poor fool is cold and wet, and he goes into the hovel first and claims there's a monster in there, and out comes Edgar, pretending to be Tom of Bedlam, raving, and Lear looks at him and he's going mad. He's slowly losing his reason, and he sees in Tom and Bedlam's ravings his own misfortune. And what daughters brought you to this? What daughters? And Kent tries to get him to go indoors into the hovel, but he will none of it. He insists on talking to this philosopher who is just raving, and Edgar's sort of like, oh my goodness, is this the king? He's got to keep up this act. This is difficult now. It's more than just this. It's like, okay, the whole place is going to hell in a handbasket. I don't know why they say hell in a handbasket, because quite frankly, you wouldn't fiddle down here into a handbasket. And this is usually the point? This is usually the point where the Milwaukee family players bring out the unicorn. Or sometimes it's a little bit later. It depends on how dark they go, because it needs a bit of lightening up. It's a really dark play. It's really dark, but I think they say that it's some sort of like, you know, metaphysical manifestation of Lear's madness, but personally I just think they like a unicorn in there. Brighten it up a little bit, because it's really, really dark. So Gloucester comes out into the storm, and he finds Lear and Kent and the fool and Tom of Bedlam, and he doesn't recognise his son at all. And so, the disguise worked, and he takes all four of them into one of the farm buildings of the castle. He does not want to leave the poor old king outside in the rain. So he snuck out of his own home to rescue the king, and he promises to come back for them. So poor old Gloucester. And in the barn, Lear, who has gone completely doolally, starts to put his daughters on trial. He sees them before him, and he uses Caius, his servant, and poor Tom and the fool as jurors to try these treasonous pair of daughters. And so he conducts this mock trial. And pretty soon, Gloucester returns, having word that Cordelia's forces are coming to Dover, and therefore he is sending the king ahead to meet those forces, so he will be safe, because his other daughters, they're looking a bit dodgy here. Looking really, really dodgy. Now, this is sort of where the whole problem, the whole problem of trying to have undue authority comes in here. So, we know all about that. See, we gods of the underworld, we're not just here to look after the dead. The dead, really, frankly, they could look after themselves. You give them Cerberus, Cerberus chews them up and slobbers on them, and then they don't want to leave again. The living don't come down because Cerberus will chew them up and slobber on them, and they won't come back again. So really, you only need one big hulking monster to keep the dead in their place. They're not that assertive. They're also highly disorganized, and there's no way they're busting out of here in a great lot. They just don't have it in them. It's what comes of being dead. What we are down here for, why we have to be in permanent residency. This is why my husband very, very rarely goes upstairs unless somebody else is down here, because we are guardians. We are guardians of grandfather. Oh, grandfather. Oh, we do. You know when I told you when I was explaining the layout of this place that a great big thing came through and smashed through all our levels and down into Tartarus, and we had to patch it up really, really quick? You remember that? Yeah, well, that's because down in Tartarus, that's where grandfather is. I think I told you about grandfather. Grandfather Kronos. Now, I only have one set of grandparents, Rhea and Kronos, and their parents were Gaia and Uranus. And Gaia and Uranus coupled and made the whole world, including the Titans. But Gaia grew tired of constantly bringing forth new beasties, that she convinced Kronos to cut off her husband's genitals, which he did. And he chucked him in the sea, and then Aphrodite popped up. So that's why great auntie Aphrodite is the mighty Aphrodite. She's really old. Had to be. Let's just say, having hoarded sexual pleasure to himself, it got shared around with the creation of mighty Aphrodite. And so Kronos then took his place as king. Of course, he then proved to be a really dodgy king, because he decided that no one was going to usurp him like he had usurped great-grandfather. And so he started eating all his children. And poor Rhea did not like having all of her children eaten, because nobody likes to have all their children eaten. And so she plotted to solve this problem, which is why she hid Father Uncle Zeus from her husband and gave him a stone to swallow, and he thought he'd eaten everybody. And so when Father Uncle Zeus grew up, he led the rebellion to overthrow his father and his uncles, all the Titans, were overthrown. Most of the female Titans were not sort of worried with, because they were not really going to take any power off him. But he definitely, they overthrew all the male Titans and shoved them down into Tartarus. And so Chronos is time. We gods are immortal because we conquered time. We conquered time, and now we have him imprisoned. Let him out and we start to age again. I don't want to show all my age. It's old. I've been around a long time. I don't want to wear that on my face. We conquered time because time was eating us. It was overbearing, overmuch. Most big, massive creatures are not immortals. The nymphs are not immortals, the centaurs, the cyclops, none of them are immortals. We conquered time, we are immortals. So, he abused us. He abused us. He swallowed us up. And so we had to make him go away. Which is why we had to patch the roof up really fast, because otherwise he'd get out. And we do not want Grandpa to get out. No letting Grandfather out. Because if you think Lear was a bad patriarch, Grandfather would eat us all. Eat us all. I don't fancy being eaten. And then he'd eat you. So, now, having learnt that Gloucester has helped Lear escape, because Gloucester still trusts Edmund. He has no idea that Edmund is a nasty, vicious, traitory person. And he trusts Edmund with a letter to Cordelia's forces. And Edmund then immediately turns around and gives this to the Duke of Cornwall, who is a really bad, bad man. Not like Albany. Albany is insipid, but Cornwall is very, very bad, and he's clearly decided he's going to have the whole kingdom to himself. And so they take Gloucester. Edmund has betrayed him to Cornwall, and they take Gloucester. Cornwall tells Goneril, go back to your castle, and Edmund, that you shouldn't say this to your own father, what I'm going to do. And so they leave, and Cornwall and Regan question him. And Gloucester answers correctly. He doesn't try to lie to save himself. He's not going to try and save himself. He's there, he's protecting the king. So he doesn't lie. But Cornwall goes and blinds him. In the middle of it, one of his servants is so horrified by what is happening that he fights Cornwall and wounds him, and Regan stabs the servant and kills him. But Cornwall still has time to completely blind the poor old man before he dies. Regan thinks, ooh, that's not such a bad thing. Now I can have a new husband. Because obviously this was not a husband of her choosing. This was a husband of her father's choosing. And she decides that she would like Edmund. Of course, her sister has also decided that she would like Edmund. And so this now sets a rivalry up between these two sisters for this bloke, who's not a really good bloke, really. He's pretty horrible. Look at what he just did to his own father. So poor old Gloucester is sent out to wander and out into the wilds, blinded, with only an old man to lead him. And he's utterly bereft. He cannot believe the betrayal of his sons. He believes his sons have both betrayed him. And so, this is where this poor old man is then met by Tom of Bedlam, who isn't Tom of Bedlam, but his son. And his son is so overcome by this. He hasn't gone with Lear. He's still out there outside the castle. And he undertakes to lead his father, who doesn't know that he's his father, to Dover, where his father means to go over the cliff, to put an end to all his miseries. And so Edgar starts leading his father off. Goneril and Edmund are now well and truly kissy kissy lovey lovey, or at least Goneril thinks that they are, and she plans to get rid of her useless husband. So she has a servant who she is going to make sure, she's going to send messages to Edmund via. And she tells off her husband. There's also they now know that war is coming, that Cordelia has invaded the country, and that they need to defend themselves. Because according to them, they're still the rightful heirs, even if they're awful monsters. This is still their country. You can't just go invading it. So they prepare their armies. Back at Gloucester Castle, Regan has decided that she's decided she too would like to have Edmund, and that it's also probably a good idea that if Gloucester is found, he should be put out of his misery, lest he tell anybody what actually happened to him. So the servant who Goneril sent with messages, because Edmund is heading back to the castle, for both her sister and Edmund, goes out in search of Edmund, having refused to give the letter to Regan. Cordelia is at Dover, and she has had reports that the king is been seen wandering about with flowers in his hair and quite mad, and she sends people out to try and find him and bring him to her. Gloucester has also come to Dover, but not to the hill. He's very confused about why it's not steep enough. But Edgar has a plan, and he convinces his father that they're at the edge of a cliff, and his father jumps but doesn't fall very far. And because he doesn't fall very far, he is quite unhurt by the fall. And a man, again Edgar, comes along and convinces him that he has been led by some great magical being, some angel or divine creature that has preserved his life, and that he is in fact, and Gloucester is so overwhelmed with this, he decides he will just live with his affliction and not attempt this again. And this is when Edgar shows himself to be Edgar, his true and good son. And so they are reunited, and now Lear comes in, and Lear is completely and utterly nuts. And he and Gloucester talk, and Gloucester knows him to be the king, even though he can't see him. And Lear is then found by Cordelia's troops, who bring him back to Cordelia's camp. The sisters, meanwhile, are preparing their troops. Edmund is going to lead in place of the Duke of Cornwall, and Albany is also leading troops. Albany then meets with a shadowy figure, comes and says, read this letter, and when the battle is finished, when we know the answer to it, on the third trumpet sound, 3 trumpet sounds, call for an avenger will come. And then he disappears. This is, of course, Edgar. But we don't know that. Well, we do know that because it's pretty bloody obvious who it's going to be. But he wants revenge on his brother for what they've done to him and his father. So whether they win or no, he's going to get his revenge this way. He also knows, Albany is one of the good guys-ish. I don't think there's any good guys in this thing. Anyway, the battle is fought. The battle is fought, the battle is won and lost, to use the Macbeth thing. Cordelia's forces lose. They've lost the battle. Cordelia and Lear are taken away to prison in chains, and Edmund sends orders for Cordelia to be hanged and to make it look like she killed herself. Now we get to the fallout of the victors, because these 2 sisters are both in love with Edmund, who has yet to decide if he wants one or the other or both or neither. And this descends into a squabble. Goneril has unknowingly poisoned Regan, who does not feel at all well. They are both determined to marry Edmund. And the Duke of Albany, having discovered that this plot to get rid of him in order to marry with Edmund, is very unhappy, and he calls for this avenger who will come and save everything. And so the trumpets sound, and Edgar, in full armour with visor down, comes and fights with his brother. And it's only when he is victorious that he reveals himself to be the true Duke of Gloucester, or Earl of Gloucester, whatever, Gloucester. Something of Gloucester. Anything below king is not worth having. I'll just tell you that, as a queen. Anything below monarch, not worth having. Edmund reveals the whole plot of everything, and reveals what he has ordered done to Cordelia before he dies. Goneril and Regan are both now dead. Regan has killed Goneril, and Goneril has killed Regan. And just as we sort of think, okay, well, everything can calm down now and the king can go back to his throne and everything, how? In comes the king carrying Cordelia, who has been hanged, and he is bereft because he gained his wits. After he was brought back to the camp, he got a decent rest and gained his wits and, sort of calmed down and recognised Cordelia for what she was and recognised himself for his own stupidity. But now it's too late. It's way too late. His favourite daughter is now dead. His kingdom is in ruins. And this is just too much for the old man. He is quite proud of the fact that he killed the guy who did this to Cordelia, the slave that hanged her. But it's all too late, and the old King Lear dies. And that's it, that's King Lear. It's a really heavy play. I mean, I might be queen of the underworld, but even I like a bit of comedy. So I do like it. There's a bit dark, even for my tastes, which is saying something. So that's King Lear. I hope you enjoyed it, if enjoy is the right word. And I'll see you again another time with another play. Bye-bye.